At my sister-in-law's wedding, my mother-in-law told me to stand in the back so I wouldn't ruin the photos with my bastard child. I said nothing. But before the vows, my daughter walked to the altar and said, "Before you kiss, I think the groom should hear this recording." That was the moment everything changed. I wasn't supposed to be in the pictures. I wasn't even supposed to be at the wedding. But I came. Not for them. For her. My daughter, Lena. She's 8. She's got these giant eyes, the kind that can read you before you speak. People say kids don't notice things, that they're too young to understand cruelty. Those people have never had to explain to a child why her grandmother refuses to hold her hand in public. We stood off to the side of the stone courtyard where the wedding photographer was organizing everyone into perfect rows. Bridesmaids in blush pink, groomsmen in blue. Camilla, my sister-in-law, was glowing in her dress. She always did know how to make everything about her feel like a magazine spread. Then there was Dolores, my mother-in-law. Hair like carved silver, mouth like a blade. She walked over to the photographer and, thinking I couldn't hear her, said in the coldest, most clipped voice I've ever heard, "Let her stand in the back. We don't want to ruin the photos with her bastard." I didn't react right away, not outwardly, but inside, I froze. I looked down at Lena, who was twirling the ends of her braid, completely unaware of what had just been said. I felt something crawl up my throat and settle there. Not quite rage, not quite shame. Just this sharp, empty heat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to take Lena and walk out, leave them standing in their picture-perfect ceremony, without the one person who had any real love left in her. But I didn't move. I didn't say a word, because that's what I'd always done. Keep the peace. Don't start drama. Don't be the bitter widow. Be polite. Be quiet. I lost Ryan, my husband, Dolores' only son, 2 weeks before Lena was born. He died in a car accident coming home from work. We were still trying to decide on a name. He never got to meet his daughter, and Dolores never forgave me for surviving when he didn't. She said Lena was the reason he was driving tired in the first place, that I stressed him out, that I pulled him into fatherhood before he was ready, that I cost her a son and gave her nothing in return. Nothing in return. As if Lena was some kind of karmic debt I owed the world. I swallowed the burn in my chest and squeezed Lena's hand. She looked up at me with a little smile. "Can we get lemonade after this?" "Sure, baby," I whispered, "as much as you want." Then I stepped to the back row, just like I was told. But something shifted in Lena that day. I didn't know it at the time, but she saw something in me, something I thought I'd hidden, that silent hurt I always tried to bury behind politeness and small smiles. She saw it, and she didn't like it. It would be hours later, just before Camilla said, "I do," when Lena would walk calmly up the altar and hold out her tablet in front of the entire crowd. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't hesitate. "Before you kiss," she said, her voice clear and calm, "I think the groom should hear this recording." That was the moment I stopped being invisible. That was the moment Dolores learned that children notice everything, and it all started with a whisper that wasn't meant to be heard, one that told me I didn't belong. But my daughter? She made sure the world knew we did. The sun was already beating down by the time I pulled into the gravel parking lot of the Meadowbrook estate. The kind of place you see in bridal magazines, white columns, manicured hedges, a string quartet already tuning up on the patio. It was all very curated, expensive, perfect, which is exactly why I didn't want to be there. But Lena deserved to be. Whether they liked it or not, she was family. As I stepped out of the car, I adjusted the hem of my dress and took a deep breath. I'd chosen the softest shade of navy, something understated, classic, non-threatening. I didn't want to give anyone an excuse to say I was trying to steal attention from the bride. Not that I ever could. Camilla had always been the center of their universe. Lena jumped out behind me, holding her little gold purse like it was a royal artifact. She looked up at me with a grin, missing her 2 front teeth. "Mom, do I look like a lady?" "You look like a queen," I told her, and meant it. She did. In her lavender dress with matching ballet flats, her hair pinned back with a pearl clip that had once belonged to my mother, she looked like the best parts of both me and Ryan. Softness and spark. She was everything beautiful I still believed in. We walked toward the reception hall, and I could already feel eyes following us, judging, calculating. The distant clinking of champagne glasses and murmurs of, "Oh, she actually came," floated through the air like smoke. And so I recognized the looks, the two sweet smiles, the subtle glances at Lena, like she was a question no one wanted to answer. It was the same every time we saw Ryan's family, since the funeral, really. After Ryan died, the little cracks that had always existed between me and his mother, Dolores, turned into a chasm. She'd never liked me. I was middle class, worked in social services, didn't go to an Ivy League school. I was never the kind of woman she imagined her only son marrying. But when I got pregnant, Ryan didn't care what she thought. He loved me. He was thrilled to be a dad. And when he died, she turned that love into resentment, like I had stolen his life. She barely visited me in the hospital after Lena was born. No flowers, no cards. Just one visit where she looked at Lena in her crib and said, "She has his chin, but she doesn't look like us." That was the start of her quiet war. Camilla, on the other hand, had always played it safe. She didn't outright hate me. She just never spoke up, never disagreed with her mother. I could see it in her eyes every time Dolores made a passive-aggressive remark. She knew it was wrong, but comfort was easier than confrontation. And so Lena and I became ghosts in our own family. Even now, at Camilla's wedding, we weren't introduced to anyone. No place card at the rehearsal dinner, no mention in the program. I wasn't asked to help with any preparations. I only found out the wedding colors when I saw them posted online. Still, I came, because Lena had been talking about the wedding for weeks. "Do you think I'll get to dance with Uncle Ethan?" she'd asked every night. "Maybe," I'd say with a shrug, not wanting to promise her anything. "I hope Aunt Camilla gives me a flower. I'm going to catch one and make a wish." She believed in the magic of it all. I didn't have the heart to take that from her. As we approached the ceremony area, the photographer began arranging family members for portraits on the stone steps. Dolores was front and center in a pale silver gown, her arm locked tightly around Camilla's. She looked straight past me as we approached, like I didn't exist. Then she glanced at Lena, narrowed her eyes, and leaned in to whisper something to the photographer. I didn't catch all of it, but I saw her gesture toward us and then nod toward the back row. Lena tugged at my hand. "Can we stand over there? I want to be by the flowers." I nodded, even though we both knew it wasn't really our choice. As I stood there watching Camilla pose with her perfect life, I felt the old weight settle back on my chest, like I was wearing grief all over again, just in a prettier dress. But I didn't know then that Lena had a plan, that she'd been paying attention to every quiet cruelty, that behind her sweet little face, she had her father's fire. And by the time the vows started, that fire would burn through every lie in the room. How tension escalates between Jessa and her in-laws, and how her daughter Lena becomes the quiet observer of truths adults ignore. The ceremony was set to begin in under an hour, but it already felt like we'd been there forever. I stood near the edge of the garden courtyard, watching as waiters floated around with trays of champagne and shrimp skewers. Guests mingled under fairy lights and white parasols, chatting and laughing like they weren't surrounded by tension thick enough to choke on. I kept one eye on Lena, who was sitting on a bench, carefully balancing her juice box on her knees. She looked completely at peace, but I knew her well enough to recognize the look on her face. She was watching everything, listening, absorbing. She always did. Dolores hadn't spoken a word to me since the photo debacle, not a glance, not a forced smile. It was as if I'd shown up in a trash bag and demanded a seat at the royal table. And still, I stayed. I stayed because leaving would have given her exactly what she wanted, and because Lena was excited to hear the vows. She even asked if she could throw petals on the bride, even though we weren't included in the ceremony. I said no, gently, trying not to let the disappointment in her eyes break me. Camilla came around briefly, checking in with guests, smiling so wide it looked painful. When she got to me, her expression wavered, just a flicker. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly, brushing an invisible speck of dust from her dress. "Of course," I replied. Lena was really looking forward to it. She gave me a short nod, then looked around before leaning in. "Please, can we just get through today without anything dramatic?" Dramatic. That word sat in my chest like an anchor. Not kind, not peaceful, not even gracious, just undisturbed, like my mere presence was a potential hazard. "Of course," I said again, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. She walked away before I could say anything else. I turned back toward the garden just in time to see Lena walking slowly along the hedges, following a small butterfly with the kind of quiet awe only children possess. For a second, I let myself breathe. Then I saw Dolores. She was standing just outside the bridal tent, her back half turned, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in a tone I knew all too well, low, clipped, confident she wouldn't be overheard, except she was wrong. Lena had paused near the corner of the tent, crouched down with her little tablet clutched in her lap. She wasn't hiding, but she wasn't being seen either. And Dolores? She had no idea the child she was speaking about could hear every word. Camilla deserves a real family, not Jessa and her little accident showing up like stray dogs. I told her it was a mistake to let them come. I told her they'd ruin the day. I froze. Every cell in my body seized up. I looked at Lena. Her expression didn't change. She sat still, like a stone, the tablet resting against her knee. There was a faint red light blinking near the corner of the screen. She was recording it. My mouth went dry. I started walking toward her, slowly, as calmly as I could. Dolores ended the call and disappeared into the tent without ever noticing her. I knelt beside Lena, trying to control my voice. "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" She looked at me with those big, unblinking eyes. "I didn't mean to hear it," she said, "but I thought maybe people should know. They think she's nice." I looked at her, stunned. "You recorded it?" She nodded once. My hands shook. I should have deleted it. I should have scolded her gently and reminded her that some things are better left alone, that it wasn't our place, that this wasn't our moment. But I couldn't lie to her, not anymore. Because the truth was, I'd let Dolores get away with treating us like less for far too long. And every time I stayed silent, Lena was learning that her mother didn't believe she deserved more. I sat next to her on the bench and stared out at the crowd. The sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and string music wrapped around us like static. Everything looked beautiful. But underneath, there was rot. And now, thanks to Lena's quiet courage, the rot had a voice. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know what Lena planned to do with that recording. I didn't even know if I had the strength to let her do it. But I knew this. Something had shifted. My daughter, this little girl I'd tried so hard to protect from pain, wasn't afraid of the truth. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I stopped being afraid of it too. The night before the wedding felt heavier than it should have. The rehearsal dinner was done, the fairy lights were twinkling in the trees, and Camilla's friends were drinking rosé and posting boomerangs of themselves clinking glasses under the moonlight. Lena and I were staying in a small guest room above the old barn that had been converted into a honeymoon suite. It was meant for overflow guests, family members they didn't quite want but couldn't completely ignore. There was a twin bed for her, a fold-out couch for me, and barely enough room to turn around. I had just pulled Lena's pajamas over her head when she turned to me and said, "Do you think Aunt Camilla really likes me?" The question hit me like a slap, so simple, so sharp. "She invited you, didn't she?" I replied gently, brushing her hair behind her ear. "She invited you too," she said, eyes steady on mine. I paused, hands still. "What makes you ask?" Lena shrugged. "I just heard things." The moment hung in the air like thunder waiting to fall. I sat on the edge of the bed trying to figure out what to say. This was where parenting got hard, not the scraped knees or math homework, but these tiny, heartbreakingly adult moments when your child begins to notice the world isn't fair. "She's just busy," I said weakly. Lena didn't look away. "Grandma doesn't like me." I inhaled, my lungs aching. "She doesn't like you either," she added, as if it were just a fact, not a wound. I reached out, held her hand. "You're not wrong, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you." She looked down, then pulled her tablet from under the pillow. "I didn't show you the whole thing earlier." I watched, confused, as she tapped a folder labeled, "Just in case." She played the recording again. Dolores's voice dripping with scorn. Camilla deserves a real family, not Jessa and her little accident showing up like stray dogs. There was no mistaking it. The tone, the venom, the ease with which she discarded us like trash left out in the rain. I covered my mouth, my stomach turning. "She shouldn't talk like that," Lena said, "but no one ever says anything." I sat in silence, staring at the wall, feeling everything. The grief, the rage, the years of swallowing insults with a smile. Lena's voice was small. "I think I want to play it at the wedding." My head snapped toward her. "Baby, you can't." "Why not?" she said, her voice calm. "She's mean. And she lies. Everyone thinks she's nice, but she's not." I stared at her. My little girl. My sweet, quiet Lena who loved butterflies and asked permission to pet dogs on the street. Now talking about confronting a woman who had hurt me more times than I could count. "She'll be angry," I whispered. Lena nodded. "I know. But maybe she won't say it again." The air shifted. Something in my chest cracked wide open. Because the truth was, I had taught Lena to be quiet, to avoid conflict, to be good even when people weren't. I thought I was protecting her. But what I'd really done was show her that love came with conditions. That dignity had to be earned. That her mother's silence was the price of being tolerated. And here she was, unlearning what I never should have taught her. I looked her in the eye. "If you really want to, I won't stop you. But are you sure?" She gave one little nod, the kind kids do when they've already made up their minds. "Then whatever happens," I said, "I'm right beside you." That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining every possible outcome. The looks, the gasps, the public fallout. I'd been tiptoeing around this family for years, afraid to speak, afraid to be seen. But Lena wasn't afraid. She didn't carry the same shame I did. She hadn't learned yet to fold herself small for the sake of others' comfort. By morning, she wore her lavender dress like armor, hair in a braid, gold clip on the side. She tucked her tablet under her arm like it was just another accessory. The guests arrived. The music started. The chairs filled. Camilla walked down the aisle in a cloud of silk and lace, radiant. Then came the moment. If anyone has reason why these two should not be wed, speak now. And Lena stood up. That's when I knew. We were done being quiet. The sun filtered through the hanging wisteria, casting lace-like shadows on the white chairs, arranged in neat rows. Everything was still, reverent. The officiant had just finished his line. If anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. There was a pause, a breath. And then, Lena stood up. She didn't look to me. She didn't flinch. She just rose from her seat near the edge of the aisle, holding her tablet like it was the most natural thing in the world. At first, people turned to look, confused, maybe thinking it was a joke, something cute a child was doing, a flower girl's prank. Camilla's smile faltered, and Ethan, the groom, blinked in surprise. Lena's voice rang clear and calm across the courtyard. "Before you kiss, I think the groom should hear this recording." Silence cracked across the venue like lightning. You could hear someone gasp. One of the bridesmaids muttered, "Wait, what?" Dolores's eyes widened. She half rose from her chair like she couldn't quite believe what was happening. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Lena tapped the screen. The audio played through the small speaker, just loud enough for everyone in the front rows to hear, and just sharp enough for the whispers to spread like wildfire. Camilla deserves a real family, not Jessa and her little accident showing up like stray dogs. I told her it was a mistake to let them come. I told her they'd ruin the day. Dolores's voice, crystal clear. You could almost feel the oxygen leave the space. Camilla went pale. Ethan turned his head slowly toward his soon-to-be mother-in-law, his face a storm of disbelief and anger. The officiant stood frozen, holding his binder like a useless shield. Dolores finally found her voice. "Turn that off," she hissed, charging toward Lena. But I was already moving. I stepped between them, blocking Dolores's path. "Don't touch her." Dolores glared at me, her voice low and venomous. "You've planned this from the beginning." I met her eyes, steady. Number, I planned to survive your cruelty. My daughter planned to expose it. The guests had fallen into stunned silence. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked relieved, like they had finally been given permission to see the truth. Camilla was crying now, quietly but uncontrollably. Her hands were shaking as she clutched her bouquet. Ethan turned to her. "Did you know she said that?" Camilla didn't speak for a long time. Then she nodded. "She's always been like that. I just hoped she'd behave today." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So you invited people she hates, asked them to play nice, and pretended it would all go away?" Camilla tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Then Ethan looked at Lena, this tiny girl standing in a sea of adults, completely unshaken. "Thank you," he said softly, "for telling the truth." He stepped away from Camilla and faced the crowd. "I think we need a moment." Then, without another word, he walked off the altar and down the aisle, past the rows of stunned guests, past Dolores, past everyone. Camilla stood alone. Dolores was still standing next to me, her expression locked in some twisted mix of fury and humiliation. "You ruined this," she said through gritted teeth. I turned to her, my voice even. "Number you did, years ago. This was just the day it caught up to you." The crowd began to stir, unsure of whether to stay, to clap, to pretend none of it happened. But they knew. Everyone knew. Lena came back to my side, slipping her small hand into mine. "I didn't mean to ruin it," she whispered. I crouched down so we were eye level. "You didn't ruin anything. You told the truth. Sometimes that's the bravest thing a person can do." She nodded slowly. "Is she going to be mad at me?" "Maybe," I said, "but that's not your burden to carry." Behind us, Camilla sank into a chair, bouquet wilting in her hands. Bridesmaids stood frozen. The band awkwardly put their instruments down. The wedding was over. Not with a kiss, but with the truth. The chairs were still there. The flowers hadn't moved. The sun was still shining like nothing had happened. But the wedding was over. Ethan never came back to the altar. A groomsman quietly helped him gather his things and leave through a side exit. Camilla sat motionless for a long time, her white dress bunching awkwardly around her as she stared out across the crowd. She didn't cry anymore, just looked hollow. Dolores disappeared into the bridal tent, trailed by two of her sisters and a woman I didn't recognize, probably trying to do damage control. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The guests milled around in uneasy clusters. Some left without saying a word. Others whispered apologies to Camilla or cast sharp looks toward me and Lena like we had torn something beautiful apart. But we hadn't. We had just shown them what was already broken. Lena held my hand tightly as we walked toward the parking lot, her tablet clutched against her chest like a badge of courage. Neither of us said much at first. The adrenaline was wearing off, and I could see the questions forming behind her eyes. Was she in trouble? Had she done something wrong? Would she be blamed? I pulled her aside before we got into the car. "Lena," I said, crouching to her level, "look at me." She did, brave, still. "I'm proud of you," I said. "You were braver than every adult in that room." She blinked. "Even you." I hesitated. Then I nodded. "Especially me." Her arms wrapped around my neck, tight and warm, and for a moment I didn't care who was watching. We stopped for ice cream on the way home. She got cotton candy swirl with extra marshmallows and sat on the curb outside the shop, kicking her little feet completely at peace. "Do you think they're going to yell at you?" she asked between bites. "Probably," I said, "but I'm not afraid of them anymore." She looked up at me, thoughtful. "I used to be." I smiled. "Me too." That night, I got a call from Camilla. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was tired, like she'd aged a decade in a day. "I'm sorry." I said nothing. "I didn't know she said that," she added quickly. "It's about the photos, about Lena." "She always says that," I said flatly. "You just stopped hearing it." Camilla didn't argue. For once, she didn't defend her mother or pretend the ugliness was something softer. I should have said something a long time ago. "Yes," I said, "you should have." She was quiet, then, "He left." "I know," she exhaled, shaky. "You must hate me." "No," I said. "I just wish you had loved us enough to speak up. Even once." Before she could reply, I hung up, because I didn't owe her the grace I used to hand out like candy. Not anymore. Days passed. The wedding became a whispered story among friends and extended family. People called it dramatic or unfortunate. But the ones who reached out to me, the quiet cousins, the forgotten aunts, they said thank you. Someone needed to say it, one of them wrote in a message. We all knew. We were just too afraid. That was the thing about truth. It didn't need an invitation. It only needed one person brave enough to say it out loud. Lena went back to school and drew a picture of a lion with a little girl riding on its back. She taped it to the fridge with the caption, "Me and Mommy when we told the truth." I looked at that drawing every morning after, and it reminded me of something I had forgotten. That silence isn't safety. That enduring cruelty isn't strength. That love, real love, doesn't make you smaller to fit inside someone else's comfort. In that moment at the altar, Lena didn't just defend herself, she defended me. She defended every moment I'd swallowed my voice, every insult I'd absorbed, every time I'd walked out of a room with my head down to protect her peace. She gave it back to me. So no, we didn't ruin the wedding. We saved ourselves. And if that truth shattered something fake, then maybe it wasn't worth keeping in the first place. Maybe you've been there too. Biting your tongue, shrinking yourself, letting people rewrite your worth because you thought staying silent was the stronger choice. But silence doesn't protect you. It just gives others permission to keep hurting you. If this story touched you, if it made you think of someone you've stood up for or wish you had, please give this video a like. It tells YouTube that stories like this matter. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone who might be carrying silence the way I once did. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Have you ever stayed quiet to keep the peace? Did you regret it? Or did you finally speak up? I read every comment, and I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want more real stories that remind us we're not alone, and hit that notification bell so you never miss one. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice matters, even when it shakes, especially when it shakes.